hopefully it'll work. Okay. So, um, Sandy, you could, if you could at the end, just send me your recording, and then I will take the ones I have, I'll put them all together and I'll send them out. Thank you very much. That was a
Sure.
great suggestion.
I hope
And
this
before
works.
next week, I will figure out how to make some space in my computer. I can't imagine that. I don't understand how I could have so much here.
Well,
Okay.
once you have it at YouTube, you could probably delete it from your computer.
Yes. Yeah, I have to figure out how to do that. Okay. So, again, back to Isaiah, back to this beautiful imagery. Um, and then Nigla Kavod Adonai, God's presence, God's kavod will appear. So the kavod, the presence of God, is this, it's the closest thing to God that can appear on earth. It's not God, but it's some sort of element of the divine being. And what will happen? Everyone, all flesh, everyone will behold it because God has spoken. All right. So here we're going to now go back again, right? Everybody, the idea here is everyone will behold how God has worked through history. They will see that God has spoken. Now, will the people of the world look at the defeat of the Babylonians by the Persians and the return of peoples to their lands? Will they see that as, you know, the actions of the God of Israel? I wouldn't think so, but they could. And that's the sense here, they could. And now, just as we began with a voice crying out, here we have it again, a voice. And this passage might be the passage we're about to read might be uh, quite familiar to you if you uh, this is often someone is not muted who should be. Encourage you to do that. Um, this passage call Omer Kra, a voice says proclaim, and another one says, what shall I proclaim? And then here it is, all flesh is grass, all its goodness like the flowers of the field. Grass withers, flower fades. When the breath of God blows upon them, people are grass, grass withers, flower fades, but the word of our God is always fulfilled. So when I did funerals back in the day, I often read this passage out of context, right? What shall I proclaim? All flesh is grass, all its goodness like the flower of the field. The grass withers, people are as grass. Grass withers, flower fades, and so on. But that's not its context here. And it's a little unclear, but I think here God, the prophet, is receiving this message from God, and he's being told, proclaim. And here we have the prophet saying, how could this be? You know, that what shall I proclaim? Flesh is glass, all goodness is, you know, how could this be? And here we get now this great imagery. Go up to a lofty mountain, O herald of joy in Zion. Alelecha, go up to a high mountain, Mivaseret Sion. So the Mivaseret Sion is a herald announcing something to Zion, right? This is clearly not the prophet. And raise up your voice, don't be afraid. Announce to the cities of Judah, behold your God. Right? So the highway has been created, God is going down. Go to Zion and announce this. God is on his way. The people will return. Mivaseret Sion is the herald of joy to Zion. It's also the name of a town in Israel on the way up to Jerusalem. Right? So they took this phrase from Isaiah and they used it because of the location of the town. Okay, and then Hine Adonai uh, uh, Chazak Yavo, God comes in might, whose arm rings triumph. God has brought along a reward, the recompense is in view. And then we get this idea of God that the moment we just saw all of this language about God and leveling hills and raising up valleys. And now we get a very different image of God. God is the shepherd who pastures the flock, gathers up lambs, carries them in an embrace while gently driving the mother sheep. So here, God is the shepherd who picks up the lamb, right, gently holding it, and while driving the mother sheep as they go towards pasture, right? So this juxtaposition of images of God of extraordinary power and God who cares about Israel so tenderly and so gently. I'm going to stop here and open it up for questions and comments. Go ahead, Francesca.
It's fascinating to me the juxtaposition of all of the moods of God. When you see him being angry and he wants to punish us, and then there's the great flood because we've been really misbehaving, and then Tower of Babel, just all the stories. And here you see the gentle side of him that's warm and caring as you would hope a father would be, and
Yes.
nurturing.
And
It's
I think,
fascinating to me.
right. So two things to be said about that. The first is God has emotions in the Bible, right? God can get angry. God is loving. So we see that. And I think that that idea is captured actually when, particularly we're aware of it on the high holidays, we talk about God as Avinu and Malkeinu, right? God is the parent. God is the loving one, but God is also the king who decrees, and sometimes those decrees, if you are a subject, they can be very harsh. Okay, other comments? Anything else about Isaiah and his imagery, Barry, and then Saul?
On the facetious side, I never knew that people were grass. I always thought we were dust.
It's actually they're two opposite images because first of all, yes, they're dust because from the dust you created and to the dust you will return, right? That's what God says to Adam after the sin in the garden. He's no longer going to be immortal, right? So returning to your dust doesn't sound, it's not a very noble idea. But remember that the people of Israel, are God says, look to the heavens and count the stars if you can, so will be your descendants. Look to not quite dust, but to the sands, right? Could you count every bit of sand? No, but your descendants will be like that. So I think this imagery can really go either way. Saul.
Yeah, it starts out with Nachamu, Nachamu. It starts out with, with comforting Israel for the exile and for sinning, and then it goes into a uh, universal diatribe or speech. Everybody's, like grass, and
Yes.
but God is over. God is number one. Okay.
So God is infinitely powerful. Israel has a special relationship with God. But in fact, Isaiah is quite universalistic. And it's one of the striking things about Isaiah, I think, that you have both of those elements. And we're going to see much more universalism as we move forward. Other comments? Yeah, Myra. Take your time. There you go.
Okay. Question. I see Francesca. Okay. I don't guess you don't see me. Hold on. Well, you can hear me.
Hear you.
Okay. My question is just a timeline. Is this before Cyrus let the people
No,
back?
it is after Cyrus. It is a response to Cyrus saying you can go home. This is the theological explanation of what's going on in this historical event.
Okay.
It ties into the idea that the temple was destroyed and the people were sent into exile for their sins. Right now, this was the penalty, and now Isaiah is saying to this people, you paid for it. In fact, double, right? So God is sending this messenger to say, be comforted. Your long exile is over. It's not so long. It's like a little less than 50 years, I think. And now you can go back. So it's really speaking, it seems that he's speaking to the exiles and interpreting for them the theological understanding of what seems to be about one people conquering another and letting them go. Okay. Thank you for asking so I could make that more clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We have very little time left, but I want to go on. Isaiah now shifts to a very different theme. And let me share again. Okay, so here, the theme now is God's majesty and power. Who measured out the waters with a hand's hollow? In other words, who took the waters in the palm of his hand, gauged the skies with a span, meted earth's dust with a measure, weighed the mountains with a scale, and the hills with a balance. Right. So here we have, it's all about creation. God is the creator of the world, but who could do this, right? God is the imagery here is of a human worker who creates things, who measures them and weighs them, right? But who could have done that, right? And who can plumb the mind of God? Here it's Ruach Adonai. It's translated here as mind, but it's sort of spirit also. Can anyone disclose God's plan? Who did God consult and who bestowed understanding? Right? Did God consult anyone and help God out? Who provided guidance in the way of the right? Who guided God in knowledge and made the path of wisdom? And the answer to these questions, and we have lots of rhetorical questions, is no one. This seems to be a response to what we see in Genesis when God seems to be consulting angels, right? Remember, God says, "Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu," let us make man in our image. And one way of understanding that seems to be that God is surrounded by these heavenly beings, and God takes counsel from them. But Isaiah really doesn't like that kind of an idea. What we're going to see is really a diatribe against idolatry. that God is God alone. There are not other figures. Uh, and we'll see it again and again. We're going to see it here really clearly. But for Isaiah, let me back up. In the biblical understanding seems to be in the Torah that there are other deities and they're there for the other people. They can have their pagan idols. But these deities they're nothing. They're minor, right? Or maybe we have angels, but everything, according to the Torah, all of them are subservient to God. But Isaiah here goes much further. There's nothing else. There's no one else. This is monotheism in its purest form. Only God is God, right? And we see that here. Who did God consult? Who bestowed understanding, provided guidance? Again, who guided God, made known the path of wisdom? Nobody. And now we go back to we had this image of God measuring out, God who created everything. The nations are but a drop in the bucket, reckoned as dust on the balance, right? They're nothing. Like dust on the balance, they're not even going to influence as you weigh something. The very coastlands are like moats. Lebanon is not fuel enough, nor its beasts enough for sacrifice, or nations are naught in God's sight, who accounts them as less than nothing, right? God is transcendent, all powerful. There are no other gods that God would have consulted. And by comparison to God, everything is like nothing. So you think that what's happened has to do about Cyrus and the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar who sent you into exile? No, those things are nothing, right? That's Isaiah's met, right? To whom can you liken God? With what form can you make comparison? Again, nothing. There's nothing. Now, what's going to happen now is that Isaiah is going to go into a critique of idolatry. I want to leave that for next time because I want to talk about idolatry in general, what Isaiah has to say about it, to what extent is it really accurate in terms of if you think about idolatry, if you think about pagan worship of idols, is he characterizing it correctly? So we'll pick up on that next time. But for the moment, any final questions or observations? Anything at all? Yes, Francesca.
I'm fascinated by this idea that God consulted with the angels. Is this something that is written somewhere, or is this a supposition that you
So,
have?
no,
I've
we've
never
got
heard about that. I thought he's supposed to know everything.
in Genesis, we certainly have angels, first of all, right? I mean, they're all over the place, and they come to Abraham and they go down to Sodom and check it out and all of that. So we have them. But the problem is really one of when God creates human beings, God uses a plural. Let us make man in our image. Now, what do we do with that? You could say God is everything, so God is a plural. It's a self-reflection. Some people have said, well, it's the plural of majesty. You know, when King Charles speaks, he says we, let us, right? God is the king, could be that. But we know all over the Bible, and particularly in the prophets, particularly in the prophet Ezekiel, we have this idea that there's this angelic chorus, and we see it in Isaiah too, around God, right? When we do the Kedusha, right? Holy, holy, holy. We're talking about the angels talking to each other in God's presence, and they're the ones who are singing, holy, 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 right? So, Na'aseh Adam b'Tzalmenu, let us make man in our image. One clear way of reading it is God's talking to the angels, right? There are midrashim about where, and the rabbi's picking up on this, and God says to the angels, should I create human beings? Right? Consulting, literally consulting. And the angels say no. Why? Because they'll do all kinds of things, and you're a God of mercy and you'll forgive them. Right? So the rabbis are playing around with this idea of God's mercy, but underlying it is this idea one could find in Genesis that God consults the angels. Isaiah will have none of it, right? Absolutely none of it. God does have heavenly messengers, perhaps. Who is God saying, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, comfort my people, right? But by the way, what do Christians do with it? Well, it's the Holy Trinity, right? The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. That's why it's plural, right? And when we have three visitors come to Abraham again, well, and two of them are going to go, angels are going to go down. No, it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So that's one way of reading it. People sometimes say, I think well, Jews and Christians have the same Bible. They have also the New Testament, right? The Christian Bible, but we share this Bible. True to some extent, but the Christian reading of those passages is completely different in many places from the way Jews read it. It may be the same words, but they're interpreted for Christians. A lot of biblical passages, and particularly in Isaiah, are about predicting the coming of Jesus and his birth and so on. This idea that Jesus is going to be born from a virgin, for example, is a reading of a passage in Isaiah. Not the way we read it, right? So yes, it's the same Bible, but that means only that it's the same words. And I'm not saying that there isn't a great deal we share in common. Most, but you have to be careful when you say it's the same Bible. It's not entirely the same. Okay, anything else? All right, I will be sending out a patchwork of recordings, and thanks Sandy for making one of them. And I'll try to patch them together, and I'm sure there will be gaps. It will not be great, and in the meantime, I'll go through my computer and try to free up some disk space.
If you go on Google Drive, I had the same problem. I went on Google Drive and I freed up a lot of space. So
Okay, so, but Google Drive is not the same thing as the computer, right? I'm recording to
it's
my computer. That sounds like disk space
Right. Cloud
rather
okay.
than,
cloud storage is what Saul's talking about. Not on your
I'm sorry?
computer, not on your hard drive. Saul's talking about cloud storage, not on your computer. You have a certain amount
Right,
of space.
right, but
You have a Google Drive. I can
right.
talk to you
You
about
think yes, Google Drive is cloud storage, but when I save to my computer,
it. Yeah.
that's disk space on the computer, correct?
Right. You do the other though. Storage to cloud storage. Is that what you're saying, Saul?
Are you sure?
You
I
have
mean, I
an
don't think
option of either
I'm
saving,
not saving to the cloud.
but you can in the future.
Um, I'm not sure how I would do that, but
It gives you two
okay.
choices. A mind system.
Yes, it gives you two choices, but one of those choices, when it says save to the cloud,
Yeah.
you only have a very limited amount of space. You're saving to Zoom, And there's very little space there. I used to save there and I'd run out of space all the time.
No, but once you put it at YouTube, you can delete it.
Right. Yeah, I could do that. I could do that and do it again and do it again. I could do that. Let me see if I could just free up space on my computer. That's probably easier. But thank you for that, because if that doesn't work or I can't figure it out, then I will do that. And in the meantime,
Yeah, just that cloud storage also has its limits,
yes,
and you
it
can
has-
you can pay uh, a yearly fee to increase that
Right.
limit.
Right, right. So I'm reluctant to give them even more. But maybe I
Yeah.
should. I'll look into how to expand. That might be the easiest thing, and I'll just save it to the cloud. I don't know. I'll figure this out, and I'll figure it out before next Tuesday. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody.
Thank you. You
It's
too, Rabbi.
good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks. Great class. Thanks very much.